Hey, tonight we're diving deep into something that'll blow your mind. We're going back, way back, to a time when humans weren't scrolling through social media or complaining about traffic. We're talking about 4.2 million years ago, when our ancestors were creating the very first forms of human expression. Cave art, prehistoric symbols, and the birth of creativity itself. You might think you know what prehistoric life was like, but trust me, there's so much more to this story than Hollywood caveman movies ever showed you. If you're enjoying this journey through time, I'd really appreciate a quick like or even a subscribe. It helps more than you know. I'm always curious where you all are watching from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Love seeing our community connect through these ancient stories. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're about to explore how creativity itself was born in the darkness of caves, carved into stone by hands that looked remarkably similar to yours. Congratulations, you've just been transported back 4.2 million years. The good news, you're witnessing the birth of human expression. The bad news, you're about to discover that everything you thought you knew about prehistoric art is completely wrong. Picture this. You're standing in the flickering light of a primitive torch, deep inside a cave that hasn't seen sunlight in millennia. The walls around you are covered in something extraordinary. Not random scratches or accidental marks, but deliberate, purposeful art. Images that tell stories, convey emotions, and reveal the inner world of minds that lived before agriculture, before writing, before civilization as we know it. This isn't just paint slapped on a wall. This is the moment humanity discovered it had something to say. The first thing that hits you about prehistoric cave art isn't what you'd expect. It's not crude stick figures or simple handprints. What you're looking at is sophisticated, intentional, and often breathtakingly beautiful. These ancient artists understood perspective, proportion, and movement in ways that would make modern art students jealous. Take the famous caves of Lascaux in France, discovered in 1940 by 4 teenagers and their dog. When they first descended into that underground gallery, they found themselves face to face with over 600 animals painted across the walls and ceilings. Bulls, horses, deer, and bison rendered with such skill and vitality that they seemed ready to leap from the stone itself. But here's where it gets really interesting. These weren't just pretty pictures. Carbon dating reveals that different sections of the cave were painted thousands of years apart. Generation after generation of artists returned to these same walls, adding their own contributions to an ongoing visual conversation that spanned millennia. Think about that for a moment. These caves weren't just art galleries. They were humanity's first social media platforms, where stories were shared, updated, and passed down through visual posts that lasted far longer than any tweet or Instagram story ever will. The artists who created these masterpieces weren't working under ideal conditions. Deep inside caves, with only flickering flames for light, using pigments they had to create from scratch. Ochre for reds and yellows, manganese for blacks, charcoal for deep greys. They ground these materials by hand, mixed them with animal fat or plant juices, and applied them using brushes made from animal hair or by blowing the pigment through hollow bones. And here's something that'll make you rethink everything about prehistoric intelligence. These artists understood the 3-dimensional contours of the cave walls and used them to their advantage. A natural bulge in the rock becomes the muscular shoulder of a bison. A depression creates the perfect shadow for a horse's belly. They weren't just painting on the walls, they were collaborating with the cave itself. But why caves? Why retreat into the deepest, darkest, most difficult to reach places to create art? The answer reveals something profound about the human psyche that hasn't changed in millions of years. Caves represented a threshold between worlds. The opening was the known, the familiar, the world of daily survival. But as you moved deeper into the earth, you entered a realm of mystery, of spirits, of the unknown. Creating art in these spaces wasn't just decoration, it was ritual, ceremony, a way of communicating with forces beyond the physical world. Recent discoveries have shown that many of these cave paintings align with the acoustics of the space. The areas with the most elaborate art often have the most dramatic echo effects. Clap your hands in front of a painted bison, and the sound bounces back transformed, almost as if the animal itself is responding. This suggests that prehistoric art wasn't meant to be viewed in silence. These caves were theatres where art, sound, and movement combined to create immersive experiences that would transport participants into altered states of consciousness. Archaeological evidence supports this theory. Researchers have found musical instruments near cave art sites, bone flutes, drums made from animal hides, rattles crafted from shells and stones. The caves weren't just galleries, they were concert halls where visual and auditory art merged into something greater than the sum of their parts. But let's talk about what these prehistoric artists were actually depicting, because it's far more complex than simple hunting scenes. Yes, there are plenty of animals. Massive cave bears, woolly mammoths, wild horses, reindeer, and predators like lions and hyenas. But look closer, and you'll notice something fascinating. The animals aren't just standing around. They're in motion, running, leaping, fighting, giving birth. These artists were capturing life itself, the dynamic energy of the natural world they lived alongside. And then there are the handprints, thousands of them, scattered across cave walls from Spain to Australia. But these aren't random slaps against stone. Many show missing fingers, leading to decades of debate about whether these were ritual amputations or simply clever artistic techniques where fingers were bent back during the printing process. Recent research suggests something even more intriguing. When researchers analysed the size and spacing of these handprints, they discovered that many were made by women and children, not just adult men, as was long assumed. This wasn't just the domain of male hunters. Entire communities, families, were participating in these artistic rituals. Some of the most mysterious elements of cave art are the abstract symbols, geometric patterns, dots, lines, grids, and shapes that don't represent anything in the natural world. For decades, archaeologists dismissed these as decorative elements or random marks. But new analysis suggests they might be something far more revolutionary. These symbols appear across different continents, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. Yet they show remarkable similarities. Dots arranged in specific patterns, lines that intersect at particular angles, shapes that repeat with mathematical precision. Some researchers believe these might represent humanity's first attempts at written language, a symbolic system for recording information that predates traditional writing by tens of thousands of years. Imagine if these seemingly random marks are actually humanity's first attempts at mathematics, astronomy, or record keeping. A dot for each day of the month, lines tracking the phases of the moon, patterns recording the migration of animals or the changing of seasons. The implications are staggering. It would mean that abstract thinking, symbolic representation, and information storage all emerged far earlier than we ever imagined. These cave artists weren't just creating pretty pictures. They were laying the foundation for every form of human communication that would follow. But here's where the story gets even more fascinating. These caves weren't just local phenomena. Similar artistic traditions emerged independently across the globe. In Australia, Aboriginal rock art dates back at least 65,000 years. In Africa, rock paintings and engravings span tens of thousands of years. In Asia, Europe, and the Americas, wherever early humans settled, they left their mark on the landscape. This suggests that the drive to create art isn't learned behavior. It's hardwired into human consciousness. The moment our ancestors developed the cognitive capacity for abstract thought, they began expressing those thoughts through visual media, and the techniques they developed were remarkably sophisticated. They understood how to create the illusion of movement by painting multiple legs on running animals. They knew how to use shading and perspective to create depth. They experimented with different pigments to create colors that have remained vibrant for thousands of years. Some cave paintings show evidence of scaffolding or platforms that would have been necessary to reach high walls and ceilings. This means organized group efforts, planning, and resource allocation dedicated specifically to artistic creation. Art wasn't a luxury or afterthought. It was important enough that communities invested significant time and energy into its production. The preservation of these artworks is nothing short of miraculous. Protected by stable cave environments, many paintings look as fresh as if they were created yesterday. The pigments have bonded with the rock in ways that make them incredibly durable, creating time capsules that allow us to peer directly into the minds of our ancestors. But accessing these mental time machines isn't easy. Many of the most significant cave art sites require crawling through narrow passages, squeezing through tight openings, and navigating underground mazes that would challenge modern explorers with all their equipment and technology. This difficulty of access wasn't accidental. The most elaborate and sacred artworks were often placed in the most challenging locations to reach. You had to be committed, prepared, and probably initiated into specific knowledge to access these underground sanctuaries. Recent technological advances have revolutionized our understanding of prehistoric art. High-resolution 3D scanning allows researchers to examine paintings in detail without damaging them. Spectral analysis reveals layers of paint invisible to the naked eye, showing how images were built up over time or modified by different artists. Some paintings that appeared to show single animals have been revealed through advanced imaging to contain multiple figures painted at different periods. It's like discovering that a single canvas contains generations of artistic dialogue, with each artist responding to and building upon the work of their predecessors. The more we study these ancient artworks, the more we realize how much we still don't understand. Every new cave discovery, every technological advancement in analysis, reveals new layers of complexity and sophistication that challenge our assumptions about prehistoric intelligence and creativity. These weren't primitive scribbles by barely evolved humans. These were sophisticated artistic statements by minds that were fundamentally identical to our own, expressing thoughts and emotions that would be recognizable to any modern viewer. The only difference was the medium and the context. Instead of canvas and oil paints, they used cave walls and natural pigments. Instead of art galleries and museums, they had sacred underground chambers lit by flickering flames. Tomorrow, we'll explore how these ancient artists developed their techniques, what their subject choices reveal about their daily lives and spiritual beliefs, and how cave art influenced every form of human expression that followed. We'll discover that these underground galleries weren't just humanity's first art studios. They were the birthplace of culture itself. The darkness presses in around you as you venture deeper into these prehistoric sanctuaries, and suddenly you realize something that changes everything. These cave artists weren't working alone. They were part of something bigger, something that connected them across vast distances and impossible spans of time. Evidence keeps mounting that prehistoric art wasn't random creative expression. It was systematic, organized, and far more sophisticated than anyone imagined. When researchers began mapping the locations of cave art sites across Europe, patterns emerged that couldn't be coincidence. Caves with similar artistic styles were connected by ancient migration routes, river systems, and mountain passes that would have facilitated travel and communication between distant groups. Think about what this means. We're not looking at isolated tribes randomly decorating their shelters. We're witnessing the world's first artistic movement, a prehistoric renaissance that spanned continents and connected human communities across thousands of miles. The pigments alone tell an incredible story of trade and cooperation. Chemical analysis of cave paintings in France reveals ochre that originated in Spain. Manganese deposits found in German cave art trace back to sources hundreds of miles away in Eastern Europe. These artists weren't just using whatever materials happened to be lying around. They were part of extensive trade networks that moved precious pigments across vast distances. But here's where it gets really mind-blowing. Recent discoveries have shown that some cave art sites were actively maintained for thousands of years, not just painted once and forgotten, but continuously updated, restored, and expanded by generation after generation of artists. Imagine walking into a cave and finding your great-great-grandfather's artwork still fresh on the walls, then adding your own contribution to the family gallery. At Cueva de las Manos in Argentina, handprint layers stack upon each other in such density that researchers have counted over 800 individual prints in a single section. Carbon dating reveals these prints span over 9,000 years of continuous artistic activity. 9,000 years. That's longer than all of recorded human history combined. These weren't just art projects. They were cultural institutions, prehistoric museums where knowledge was preserved and transmitted across generations through visual storytelling. Each cave became a library, a school, and a sacred site all rolled into one. And the stories they tell are far more complex than simple hunting narratives. Careful analysis of animal depictions reveals seasonal patterns that suggest these paintings served as calendars or timing guides for migration and resource gathering. A herd of bison painted near the cave entrance might indicate the best time for hunting. Reindeer depicted in winter coats could mark the beginning of the cold season. Some caves show clear evidence of astronomical observations. Dots and lines align with star patterns visible from the cave entrance at specific times of year. These weren't just pretty decorations. They were functional tools for navigation, timekeeping, and seasonal planning that would have been essential for survival in harsh prehistoric environments. But perhaps the most revolutionary discovery is how these artists understood and manipulated light itself. Modern researchers using computer modeling have discovered that many cave paintings were designed to be viewed under specific lighting conditions. A painting that looks static under steady illumination comes alive when viewed by flickering firelight, creating the illusion of movement through carefully planned shadow play. They understood animation, literally bringing their artwork to life through the dance of flame and shadow. A horse painted with multiple legs doesn't just suggest movement, it actually appears to gallop when torchlight flickers across its surface. These artists had discovered cinema tens of thousands of years before Edison invented the motion picture camera. The sophistication extends to the acoustic properties of these spaces. Researchers have found that the areas with the most elaborate artwork often correspond to the cave's acoustic sweet spots, places where sound resonates and amplifies in specific ways. Clapping, singing, or drumming in these locations creates echo effects that would have seemed magical to prehistoric visitors. This suggests that cave art experiences were multimedia events, combining visual art, music, storytelling, and probably dance into immersive ceremonies that engaged all the senses. Picture shamans or spiritual leaders using these decorated chambers as theatres for rituals that transported participants into altered states of consciousness through carefully orchestrated combinations of art, sound, and movement. The psychological impact of these underground experiences can't be overstated. Descending into the earth, away from sunlight and familiar surroundings, then encountering these powerful artistic displays by flickering firelight would have been profoundly transformative. Modern visitors to well-preserved cave art sites report feeling overwhelmed by the experience, despite having electric lighting and guided tours. Imagine the impact on someone who had never seen anything like it before, approaching these images as part of a sacred ceremony in the dancing light of torches, surrounded by echoing sounds and the presence of their entire community. These weren't just art galleries, They were ancient virtual reality systems designed to alter consciousness and create shared spiritual experiences. The technical mastery required to create these effects reveals planning and artistic sophistication that rivals any modern installation art. These prehistoric artists understood their medium completely, using every aspect of the cave environment to enhance their artistic message. They were the world's first environmental artists, creating site-specific works that couldn't exist anywhere else, and they weren't working from life alone. Many cave paintings show animals that hadn't lived in those regions for thousands of years, suggesting that artistic knowledge and imagery were being passed down through oral tradition long after the original subjects had disappeared. Artists were painting mammoths and cave lions from cultural memory, preserving images of creatures their grandparents' grandparents might have known. This preservation of visual information through art served as a crucial survival tool. A painting of a long-extinct predator could teach young hunters what to watch for in regions where those animals might still exist. Depictions of seasonal animal behaviors could provide essential guidance for tracking and hunting strategies passed down through generations. Recent discoveries have also revealed that many caves contain multiple artistic layers, with newer paintings deliberately placed over or alongside older ones. This wasn't accidental or careless. Analysis shows that later artists carefully chose locations that would complement rather than obscure earlier works, creating visual dialogues across centuries. In some cases, artists added details to existing paintings, extending a line here, adding a horn there, collaborating with long-dead predecessors in ways that created artworks spanning thousands of years. Imagine contributing to a painting that your great-great-great-grandmother started, knowing that your great-great-great-grandchildren might add their own touches someday. The social implications are staggering. These caves represent humanity's first collaborative art projects, creative endeavors that required community coordination, resource sharing, and cultural continuity across time spans that dwarf any modern artistic movement. The Renaissance lasted a few centuries. Prehistoric cave art traditions lasted tens of thousands of years, and they were global phenomena. While European caves get the most attention, similar artistic traditions emerged independently on every continent where humans settled. Australia's Aboriginal rock art, Africa's sand paintings, Asia's prehistoric petroglyphs, and the Americas' ancient cave art all show remarkable similarities in technique, subject matter, and symbolic content. This suggests that the drive to create art isn't culturally learned behavior. It's hardwired into human consciousness at such a fundamental level that it emerges wherever humans develop the cognitive capacity for abstract thought. The moment our ancestors could think symbolically, they began expressing those thoughts through visual media. The preservation of these artworks borders on miraculous. Protected by stable cave environments, many paintings retain colors so vivid they look freshly applied. The pigments have bonded with rock surfaces in ways that make them incredibly durable, creating time capsules that allow direct communication between prehistoric minds and modern viewers. But this preservation comes at a cost. Many cave art sites are incredibly fragile, threatened by humidity changes, carbon dioxide from visitors' breath, and contamination from modern pollutants. Some of the world's most significant caves have been sealed to protect them, accessible only to researchers or through carefully controlled virtual reconstructions. The loss of any cave art site is irreplaceable damage to human cultural heritage. Each cave contains unique artistic traditions, local variations in style and technique that reveal the diversity of prehistoric human experience. When we lose a decorated cave, we lose a voice from the past that can never be recovered. Modern technology offers new ways to preserve and study these ancient artworks without damaging them. High-resolution 3D scanning creates perfect digital replicas that can be studied and shared without physical access to the original caves. Spectral analysis reveals hidden layers and details invisible to the naked eye, uncovering artistic techniques and historical information that enhance our understanding of prehistoric cultures. These technological tools have revolutionized cave art research, allowing scientists to detect paintings that have faded beyond visibility, reconstruct damaged sections, and analyze pigment compositions without taking samples. Virtual reality reconstructions now allow people worldwide to experience these prehistoric galleries without ever setting foot underground. But technology can't replace the visceral impact of standing before these ancient artworks in their original setting. The combination of flickering light, echoing acoustics, and the knowledge that you're seeing exactly what prehistoric humans saw in exactly the same place creates an emotional connection across time that no digital reproduction can fully capture. The weight of that realization settles around you like the cave's ancient silence. You're not just looking at old paintings, you're witnessing the birth of human consciousness itself, the moment our species first realized it had an inner world worth sharing. What strikes you most about these prehistoric masterpieces isn't their age, though that's staggering enough. It's how familiar they feel. The emotions captured in these images, the careful attention to detail, the obvious pride in craftsmanship, all of it speaks to motivations and feelings that any modern artist would recognize immediately. But the more researchers study these caves, the more questions emerge. Why did some communities invest enormous resources in creating elaborate underground galleries, while others left barely any artistic traces? What determined which caves became artistic centers and which remained empty? The answers reveal a complex prehistoric world of cultural exchange, artistic rivalry, and creative innovation that challenges every assumption about early human society. Consider the cave of Chauvet in France, discovered only in 1994, but containing some of the oldest known cave art, dating back over 36,000 years. The sophistication of these paintings shocked the archaeological community. Instead of the crude early attempts you might expect from humanity's first artists, Chauvet displays techniques so advanced that they wouldn't look out of place in a modern art gallery. The artists at Chauvet understood perspective so well that they created convincing illusions of three-dimensional space on flat cave walls. They mastered shading techniques that give their animals volume and weight. They even developed a form of artistic signature, leaving handprints and personal marks that identify individual artists across different sections of the cave. But here's what's truly mind-bending. The earliest paintings at Chauvet are also the most sophisticated. Rather than showing artistic evolution over time, the cave reveals that prehistoric humans achieved artistic mastery almost immediately, then maintained that level of skill for thousands of years. It's as if they unlocked the secrets of visual expression all at once and never forgot them. This pattern repeats across multiple cave sites. The oldest art is often the best art, suggesting that prehistoric communities had developed sophisticated artistic training methods that allowed them to pass advanced techniques directly from master to student, without the trial and error process you'd expect from emerging art forms. Archaeological evidence supports this theory. Researchers have found what appear to be practice stones near cave art sites, smaller rocks covered with preliminary sketches and technique exercises. These weren't random doodles. They show systematic skill development, with beginners practicing basic shapes and proportions before graduating to more complex compositions. Some caves even contain what can only be described as art schools, sections where multiple hands worked on the same images, with clear evidence of instruction and correction. Experienced artists would begin a figure, then allow students to complete it under guidance. You can actually see the transition points where different skill levels took over the same painting. The social organization required for this kind of systematic artistic education reveals prehistoric communities far more complex and sophisticated than the scattered hunter-gatherer bands traditionally imagined. These were cultures that valued artistic skill highly enough to dedicate significant resources to training and development. And the training wasn't just technical. Analysis of cave art compositions reveals sophisticated understanding of visual storytelling, emotional impact, and symbolic communication. These artists knew how to guide a viewer's eye through a composition, how to create dramatic tension through the placement of figures, and how to use empty space as effectively as painted areas. Take the famous panel of horses at Chauvet. At first glance, it appears to show a simple herd of wild horses, but careful analysis reveals a complex narrative structure. The horses are arranged to suggest movement through time and space, with some figures representing the same animals at different moments in their journey. It's prehistoric cinema, telling a complete story through a series of connected images. This narrative sophistication appears throughout cave art sites worldwide. Aboriginal rock art in Australia tells complex Dreamtime stories through interconnected panels that must be read in specific sequences. African rock art depicts hunting expeditions, social ceremonies, and spiritual journeys through multi-scene compositions that unfold like graphic novels. The universal appearance of narrative art suggests that storytelling through images is as fundamental to human nature as language itself. Perhaps more fundamental, since these visual stories predate written language by tens of thousands of years and can communicate across cultural and linguistic barriers that words cannot cross. But prehistoric artists weren't content with simple storytelling. They experimented with abstract concepts that pushed the boundaries of visual communication. Geometric patterns appear in cave art worldwide, often integrated with animal figures in ways that suggest symbolic meaning beyond mere decoration. Some researchers believe these geometric elements represent early attempts at mapping, with lines and shapes corresponding to landscape features, migration routes, or territorial boundaries. Others suggest they might be visual representations of altered consciousness, attempts to record and communicate the imagery experienced during shamanic trances or spiritual visions. Recent studies of ayahuasca-induced hallucinations have revealed striking similarities to prehistoric geometric cave art, suggesting that these ancient patterns might represent humanity's first attempts to document and share mystical experiences. If true, these caves weren't just art galleries, but repositories of spiritual knowledge, places where communities preserved and transmitted their understanding of consciousness itself. The implications extend far beyond art history. If prehistoric humans were systematically exploring and documenting altered states of consciousness, it suggests a level of psychological sophistication that rivals modern understanding. These weren't primitive minds randomly decorating cave walls. They were sophisticated explorers of human consciousness, using art as a tool to map the inner landscape of the mind. This exploration of consciousness through art might explain why so many cave paintings seem to pulse with life and energy that transcends their static medium. The artists weren't just depicting external reality, they were channeling internal experiences, emotional states, and spiritual insights that gave their work a psychological depth that still resonates with modern viewers. The technical methods they developed to achieve these effects reveal an understanding of human perception that wouldn't be formally recognized by science for thousands of years. They knew that flickering light creates the illusion of movement. They understood that certain color combinations enhance emotional impact. They recognized that acoustic properties could amplify the psychological effect of visual imagery. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what these prehistoric artists knew intuitively, that human perception is actively constructed by the brain rather than passively received. Cave artists learn to hack the visual processing system, creating images that trigger specific neural responses and emotional reactions in viewers. The consistency of these techniques across different cultures and time periods suggests that prehistoric communities developed sophisticated understanding of human psychology through systematic observation and experimentation. They were the world's first cognitive scientists, using art as their laboratory for exploring how minds work. This scientific approach to artistic creation explains why cave art has such enduring power. These images were designed based on deep understanding of human visual processing, emotional response, and psychological needs. They work as well today as they did 40,000 years ago because they're based on fundamental aspects of human nature that haven't changed. But the most remarkable aspect of prehistoric cave art isn't its technical sophistication or psychological insight. It's the simple fact that it exists at all. In an environment where every calorie burned and every hour spent had to contribute directly to survival, these communities chose to invest enormous resources in creating something that served no immediate practical purpose. Food procurement, shelter construction, tool making, all the activities essential for survival in harsh prehistoric environments took priority over everything else. Yet somehow, these communities found time, energy, and materials to create elaborate underground art galleries that serve no obvious survival function. This suggests that artistic expression isn't a luxury that emerges only after basic needs are met. It's a fundamental human drive that asserts itself even under the most challenging circumstances. The urge to create, to express, to leave a mark that says, "I was here, and this is what I experienced," appears to be as basic to human nature as the need for food and shelter. The caves tell us that our ancestors valued beauty, meaning, and creative expression highly enough to risk their lives accessing dangerous underground spaces, to sacrifice precious resources, creating pigments and tools, and to spend countless hours in cold, dark, uncomfortable conditions perfecting their artistic vision. They did this not because they had to, but because they needed to. Something in human consciousness demands creative expression, requires the transformation of internal experience into external form that can be shared and preserved. Cave art represents the first flowering of this fundamental drive, the moment when humans discovered they could make their inner worlds visible to others. As you stand in the dancing light of ancient flames, surrounded by images that have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, you begin to understand something profound about human nature. We are not just tool-using animals or social creatures or problem-solving machines. We are meaning-making beings who cannot rest until we have transformed our experiences into art that speaks across the vastness of time. The hands that painted these caves were anatomically identical to yours. The minds behind these images possess the same capacity for wonder, creativity, and expression that drives modern artists. The only difference is medium and context. Where we have canvas and oil paint, they had stone walls and natural pigments. Where we have galleries and museums, they had sacred chambers lit by flickering flames. But the essential human need to create, to express, to leave something beautiful behind remained exactly the same. In these prehistoric galleries, you're not just witnessing the birth of art, you're discovering the deepest truth about what it means to be human. The flickering shadows dance across your face as you realize something that changes everything about how we understand prehistoric consciousness. These cave artists weren't just painting what they saw in the outside world. They were documenting something far more profound, something that reveals the true depth of early human awareness. Recent analysis of cave art pigments has uncovered evidence that prehistoric artists were experimenting with psychoactive substances. Traces of compounds found in certain mushrooms, plants, and minerals suggest that some of these artistic sessions were undertaken in altered states of consciousness. The swirling, dreamlike quality of certain cave paintings suddenly makes perfect sense when you consider they might have been created while the artists were experiencing profound shifts in perception. This wasn't random drug use. It was systematic exploration of consciousness, with art serving as the recording medium for these inner journeys. The geometric patterns, the flowing animal forms that seem to morph and blend into each other, the impossible perspectives that shouldn't work but somehow do, all of it points to artists who were documenting experiences beyond ordinary waking consciousness. Archaeological evidence supports this theory. Researchers have found grinding stones stained with residues of plants, known for their mind-altering properties near cave art sites. Bone pipes that could have been used for smoking these substances. Storage containers that show traces of fermented beverages that would have produced mild intoxication. But here's what's truly remarkable. The art created during these altered states isn't chaotic or random. It shows the same technical mastery, the same sophisticated understanding of composition and visual impact as paintings created in normal consciousness. These artists had learned to maintain their artistic skills even while exploring expanded states of awareness. This suggests a level of mental discipline and training that rivals modern shamanic traditions. These weren't people getting intoxicated and randomly slapping paint on walls. They were skilled practitioners who had learned to navigate altered consciousness while maintaining their artistic abilities, using these states as tools for accessing deeper levels of creative inspiration. The implications are staggering. If prehistoric humans were systematically using consciousness-altering substances as part of their artistic practice, it means they understood something about the relationship between mental states and creativity that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. They knew that expanding awareness could unlock new forms of artistic expression. Consider the famous sorcerer figure at Lascaux cave in France. This enigmatic image shows a humanoid figure with animal features, antlers, a beard, and what appears to be a dancing posture. For decades, archaeologists debated whether this represented a shaman, a deity, or some kind of mythological being. But viewed through the lens of altered consciousness research, the sorcerer takes on new meaning. It might be a self-portrait of an artist documenting their own transformation during a shamanic journey, a visual record of the shape-shifting experiences reported by people under the influence of certain psychoactive compounds. The dancing posture makes sense too. Rhythmic movement, often combined with repetitive music or chanting, is a common technique for inducing altered states of consciousness. The artist might have been documenting not just what they saw, but how they moved during these transformative experiences. Similar figures appear in cave art sites worldwide. Dancing humans with animal features, beings that seem to exist between worlds, images that capture the fluid boundary between human and animal consciousness that emerges during certain altered states. These aren't random mythological creatures, they're documentary records of inner experiences. The universality of these shamanic figures across different continents and cultures suggests that the exploration of consciousness through art was a fundamental aspect of early human spiritual development. Wherever humans developed the cognitive capacity for symbolic thought, they also developed techniques for expanding that consciousness and recording the results through visual art. But altered consciousness was just one tool in the prehistoric artist's arsenal. Recent discoveries have revealed that these ancient creators were also master observers of the natural world, documenting phenomena with scientific precision that wouldn't be matched until the development of modern research methods. Cave paintings in Europe show animals with seasonal coat changes, behavioral patterns that correspond to specific times of year, and anatomical details so accurate they've helped modern zoologists understand extinct species. These artists weren't just painting from memory or imagination, they were conducting systematic observations of animal behavior and recording their findings with documentary precision. Some cave art appears to function as field guides, with different animals shown in various poses that reveal key identifying characteristics. A bison painted from the side to show its distinctive hump, the same animal painted from the front to show the shape of its head, from behind to display its hindquarters. These weren't artistic choices, they were scientific illustrations designed to convey maximum information about each species. The accuracy extends to details that would require months of careful observation to notice. Seasonal changes in antler growth, the specific gait patterns of different animals, behavioral quirks that would only be apparent to someone who had spent extensive time watching these creatures in their natural habitat. This level of observational precision reveals prehistoric communities with sophisticated understanding of animal behavior, migration patterns, and ecological relationships. They weren't just hunting these animals, they were studying them with the dedication of modern wildlife biologists. The knowledge recorded in cave art would have been essential for survival. Understanding when animals shed their winter coats indicated seasonal timing. Recognizing behavioral cues that preceded migration helped predict when herds would move through specific territories. Documenting which plants certain animals preferred revealed information about seasonal food availability. But the scientific precision of cave art extends beyond animal documentation. Recent analysis has revealed that many caves contain astronomical observations recorded with remarkable accuracy. Star patterns, moon phases, seasonal changes in daylight duration, all documented through carefully placed dots, lines, and geometric patterns. The Lascaux cave contains what appears to be a star map, showing the constellation Pleiades as it would have appeared 17,000 years ago. The positioning of the dots matches historical astronomical data with precision that suggests these prehistoric observers understood celestial mechanics far better than previously imagined. Other caves show evidence of lunar calendars, with sequences of marks that correspond to moon phases over multiple months. Some display what might be solar calendars, tracking the changing position of sunrise and sunset throughout the year. These weren't random decorative elements. They were functional astronomical tools. The sophistication of these observations required not just individual genius, but community-wide dedication to long-term data collection. Multiple generations would have been required to accumulate the observational data necessary for accurate astronomical documentation. This suggests prehistoric societies with strong cultural continuity and systematic approaches to knowledge preservation. The caves served as libraries, storing accumulated wisdom about the natural world in visual form that could be accessed and updated by future generations. Each painting was a piece of data in a vast prehistoric database that recorded everything from animal behavior to stellar positions to seasonal changes. This scientific approach to documentation reveals minds that were far from primitive. These were sophisticated observers conducting systematic research and developing complex models of natural phenomena. They understood that knowledge accumulated over time could be more valuable than any individual insight. The preservation of this information through visual art was itself a technological breakthrough. Without writing systems, these communities developed alternative methods for storing and transmitting complex information that could survive for thousands of years. The caves became humanity's first scientific journals, peer-reviewed by generations of observers who added their own contributions to the accumulated knowledge. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of prehistoric scientific documentation is how it was integrated with artistic expression. These weren't dry technical manuals. They were beautiful, emotionally engaging artworks that made scientific information memorable and meaningful. Modern research has shown that information presented in visual, narrative, or artistic formats is retained far better than abstract data. Prehistoric artists understood this intuitively, encoding essential survival information in forms that would engage multiple cognitive systems simultaneously. A painting of a bison wasn't just documentation of that animal's appearance. It was a story about when and where bisons could be found, how they behaved in different seasons, what their presence indicated about environmental conditions, and how they fit into the larger ecosystem. The artistic presentation made all of this information accessible and memorable. The integration of science and art in cave paintings reveals a holistic approach to knowledge that modern educational systems are trying to rediscover. These prehistoric teachers understood that effective learning requires engagement of both analytical and creative cognitive processes. But the caves contain more than just scientific documentation and artistic expression. They hold evidence of humanity's first experiments in what we might call social media, communication systems that connected communities across vast distances and time periods. Certain symbolic elements appear in caves separated by thousands of miles, suggesting communication networks that spanned continents. A particular way of drawing horse heads, a specific geometric pattern, a unique handprint technique. These elements show up in caves that had no apparent direct contact with each other. This suggests that artistic techniques, symbolic systems, and cultural innovations were spreading through prehistoric populations far more rapidly and extensively than traditional models of early human migration would predict. Ideas were traveling faster than people, carried by trading relationships, seasonal gatherings, and cultural exchanges that left traces in cave art. The caves served as message boards where traveling groups could leave information for others who might follow the same routes. Handprints functioned as signatures, identifying which groups had passed through specific locations. Animal paintings might indicate seasonal hunting opportunities or warn of dangerous predators in the area. Some caves show clear evidence of ongoing conversations between different groups, with later visitors adding elements to existing paintings or creating new images that respond to earlier works. These weren't just individual artistic statements. They were community dialogues conducted through visual media across extended time periods. The sophistication of these communication systems reveals prehistoric societies with complex social networks, shared cultural practices, and systematic methods for information exchange. They weren't isolated bands struggling for survival. They were interconnected communities, participating in continent-spanning cultural conversations. As you stand surrounded by these ancient messages, you begin to understand that cave art represents far more than primitive decoration. These underground galleries were humanity's first multimedia communication centers, combining artistic expression, scientific documentation, spiritual exploration, and social networking into integrated systems that served the complex needs of sophisticated prehistoric communities. The hands that created these masterpieces possess the same capacity for wonder, creativity, and systematic observation that drives modern scientists, artists, and communicators. The only differences are tools and context. Where we have laboratories and studios and social media platforms, they had caves lit by flickering flames. Where we have specialized academic disciplines, they had integrated approaches to knowledge that combined art, science, and spirituality into unified worldviews. The caves reveal that the fundamental human drives to create, to understand, to communicate, and to connect have remained constant throughout our species' history. The forms of expression may have evolved, but the underlying needs they serve remain exactly the same. In these prehistoric galleries, you're witnessing not just the birth of art, but the emergence of human consciousness itself in all its complexity. The capacity for symbolic thought, creative expression, scientific observation, spiritual exploration, and social communication, all the cognitive abilities that define modern humanity, were already fully developed in these ancient minds. The only thing that's changed is our tools. The minds behind these cave paintings possess the same intellectual and creative potential as any modern genius. They just applied it to different challenges, in different environments, with different resources. Standing here in the dancing light of ancient flames, you realize that human nature hasn't evolved since these caves were painted. We're still the same species, driven by the same needs, possessed of the same capabilities. The caves are mirrors, reflecting not some primitive past, but the eternal aspects of human consciousness that connect us across the vast expanse of time. The silence in these caves isn't empty. It's pregnant with meaning, thick with the weight of discoveries that keep reshaping everything we thought we knew about human consciousness. As you venture deeper into these prehistoric sanctuaries, guided by the same flickering light that illuminated the world's first artists, you begin to notice something that changes everything. These caves weren't just individual projects. They were part of a vast network, a prehistoric internet of sorts, where information flowed between communities separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of generations. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that certain artistic techniques, specific pigment recipes, and particular symbolic elements appear simultaneously in caves across different continents, suggesting a level of cultural communication that shouldn't have been possible given our traditional understanding of prehistoric society. But here's where it gets really fascinating. Chemical analysis of pigments used in European caves has revealed trace elements that originated in Africa. Ochre deposits found in Australian Aboriginal rock art sites contain minerals that can only be traced to specific locations in Asia. These weren't accidental contaminations. They were deliberate choices, evidence of trade networks and cultural exchanges that spanned the entire inhabited world. Think about what this means. While we imagined isolated bands of hunter-gatherers barely surviving in harsh environments, the reality was an interconnected web of communities sharing resources, techniques, and ideas across distances that would challenge modern transportation systems. These cave artists were part of humanity's first global culture. The evidence keeps mounting. Certain handprint techniques appear in caves separated by oceans. Specific ways of depicting animal movement show up independently on different continents. Abstract symbols that seemed random and local are now recognized as elements of a widespread symbolic language that connected prehistoric communities worldwide. Recent discoveries in newly explored caves have revealed what can only be described as prehistoric art schools, complete training centers where master artists pass their knowledge to students through systematic instruction programs. These weren't casual learning experiences. They show evidence of structured curricula, practice exercises, and graduation ceremonies that mark the transition from student to practicing artist. The training was incredibly sophisticated. Students began with basic exercises, learning to control their breathing while applying pigments, developing the steady hand control necessary for detailed work, and mastering the preparation of different pigment types for various effects. Advanced students learned perspective techniques, animal anatomy, and the complex acoustic principles necessary for creating art that worked with the cave's natural sound properties. But the most remarkable aspect of these prehistoric art schools was their focus on consciousness exploration. Students weren't just learning technical skills. They were being trained in methods for accessing altered states of awareness, for maintaining artistic control during spiritual journeys, and for translating inner experiences into visual forms that could communicate those experiences to others. Archaeological evidence suggests that graduation from these programs involved initiation ceremonies, where students demonstrated their ability to create art while in trance states. Successful initiates became not just artists, but spiritual guides who could lead others through transformative experiences using art as the vehicle. This integration of artistic training with consciousness exploration reveals prehistoric educational systems far more sophisticated than anything that would emerge again until modern shamanic traditions. These communities understood that true artistic mastery required not just technical skill, but expanded awareness and spiritual development. The caves served as more than just galleries or training centers. They functioned as prehistoric libraries where knowledge was stored in visual formats that could survive for millennia. But unlike modern libraries organized by subject or author, these visual databases were arranged according to seasonal cycles, migration patterns, and ceremonial calendars that made information accessible when it was most needed. A section of cave art depicting winter animals might be positioned to catch the light of the winter solstice, making that information naturally highlighted during the season when it would be most relevant. Summer hunting scenes might be illuminated by midsummer light filtering through cave openings. The caves themselves became interactive information systems that revealed different knowledge at different times of year. This seasonal organization of information reveals understanding of learning psychology that wouldn't be formally recognized until modern educational research. These prehistoric teachers knew that information is most effectively absorbed when it's immediately relevant to the learner's current needs and circumstances. But the caves contained more than just practical information. They housed humanity's first experiments in what we might call virtual reality. Immersive experiences designed to transport participants into alternate realities through carefully orchestrated combinations of visual art, sound, movement, and altered consciousness. Recent acoustic analysis has revealed that many decorated caves were designed as resonating chambers, where specific sounds would create powerful psychological effects. Chanting in certain locations produces frequencies that induce trance states. Drumming in acoustic sweet spots creates rhythmic patterns that synchronize brain waves among groups of listeners. The visual art was positioned to work with these acoustic effects, creating multimedia experiences that engaged all the senses simultaneously. Flickering torchlight made painted animals appear to move in rhythm with drum beats. Echoing chants seemed to emerge from painted figures on the walls. The boundaries between art, music, and spiritual experience dissolved into unified ceremonies that transported participants beyond ordinary consciousness. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what these prehistoric ceremonialists understood intuitively. Synchronized sensory input across multiple channels can induce profound alterations in consciousness, creating shared experiences that bond communities together and provide access to psychological states that enhance creativity, problem-solving abilities, and emotional healing. These underground ceremonies served functions that modern society has largely forgotten. They provided community bonding experiences that created social cohesion strong enough to survive harsh environmental challenges. They offered therapeutic processes for dealing with trauma, grief, and psychological stress. They created educational experiences that made essential survival information memorable and accessible. But perhaps most importantly, they provided direct access to the creative source that drives all human innovation. Participants in these cave ceremonies emerged with enhanced artistic abilities, improved problem-solving skills, and innovative solutions to survival challenges that couldn't have been developed through ordinary thinking processes. The caves were humanity's first research and development centers, places where expanded consciousness was systematically explored and applied to practical problems. The innovations that emerged from these underground laboratories, new hunting techniques, improved tool designs, enhanced social organization methods, provided the foundation for all subsequent human cultural development. This practical application of consciousness exploration explains why cave art traditions persisted for tens of thousands of years. They weren't just artistic or spiritual practices. They were essential technologies that gave communities accessing these methods significant survival advantages over groups that hadn't developed these capabilities. The decline of cave art traditions coincides with the development of agriculture and permanent settlements. As humans gained more control over their environment through farming and domestication, the need for consciousness-expanding techniques that could generate innovative solutions to survival challenges diminished. But something was lost in that transition. The integrated approach to knowledge that combined artistic expression, scientific observation, spiritual exploration, and practical problem-solving gave way to increasingly specialized and fragmented approaches to understanding. Modern civilization gained stability and predictability, but lost the holistic awareness that had sustained human communities through hundreds of thousands of years of environmental challenges. The caves remind us of capabilities we've forgotten, ways of thinking and perceiving that were once considered normal aspects of human consciousness. The artists who created these masterpieces possessed cognitive abilities that we've largely abandoned in favor of more linear, analytical approaches to problem solving. Recent research in creativity and innovation has begun to rediscover the value of the consciousness-expanding techniques preserved in cave art traditions. Modern scientists, artists, and entrepreneurs are experimenting with methods for accessing the same expanded states of awareness that prehistoric artists used to generate their groundbreaking innovations. The results are promising. Researchers who learn to access altered states of consciousness report enhanced creativity, improved problem-solving abilities, and breakthrough insights that couldn't be achieved through conventional thinking methods. The prehistoric techniques preserved in cave art are being adapted for modern applications in fields ranging from scientific research to artistic creation to therapeutic intervention. But accessing these capabilities requires more than just technique. It demands the same kind of systematic training and community support that prehistoric art schools provided. Modern practitioners are discovering that consciousness exploration is most effective when conducted within supportive communities that share knowledge, provide guidance, and create safe spaces for experimentation. The caves teach us that human consciousness is far more flexible and capable than modern education systems acknowledge. The minds that created these prehistoric masterpieces possessed the same neural architecture as contemporary humans, but they had learned to use that architecture in ways that accessed capabilities we've largely forgotten. Standing in these ancient galleries, surrounded by evidence of cognitive abilities that seem almost superhuman by modern standards, you begin to understand that cave art represents more than just the birth of artistic expression. It documents the full potential of human consciousness, capabilities that remain dormant in modern minds, but could be reactivated through appropriate training and community support. The flickering shadows on the cave walls seem to whisper possibilities, reminding you that the boundaries between ordinary and expanded consciousness are far more permeable than modern culture acknowledges. These prehistoric artists didn't just paint what they saw, they painted what they could become, leaving visual instructions for accessing states of awareness that could transform not just individual lives, but entire civilizations. As you prepare to emerge from these underground sanctuaries, carrying their ancient wisdom back into the modern world, you realize that the caves haven't just shown you humanity's past. They've revealed its future potential, the dormant capabilities that could be awakened if we learn to think like our prehistoric ancestors, while applying their insights to contemporary challenges. The journey through these caves changes you. You can't return to ordinary consciousness unchanged after witnessing evidence of what human awareness can achieve when properly developed and applied. The ancient artists didn't just create beautiful images, they left a roadmap for human potential that we're only beginning to understand. The cave walls hold more than pigment and stone. They contain the blueprints for a more complete way of being human, one that integrates all the capabilities these prehistoric masters had learned to access. Their legacy isn't just artistic, it's a challenge to remember what we're truly capable of becoming. Tomorrow, we'll explore how these ancient consciousness technologies influence the development of human civilization, what happened when these practices were abandoned, and how modern research is beginning to rediscover the practical applications of prehistoric wisdom. We'll discover that these caves didn't just preserve humanity's artistic heritage, they safeguarded the instruction manual for human consciousness itself. The torchlight flickers one final time as you turn toward the cave entrance. But the images burned into your memory will illuminate your understanding forever. You've witnessed the birth of human potential, documented in pigment and stone by minds that understood capabilities we're only beginning to rediscover. In the growing light of the cave entrance, you carry with you more than just knowledge of prehistoric art. You carry the seeds of transformation, the ancient understanding that human consciousness is far more vast and capable than modern civilization has learned to acknowledge. The caves have shown you not just where we came from, but who we could become again. The silence that greets you as you approach the cave entrance feels different now. It's not empty space, but a living presence that has absorbed tens of thousands of years of human breath, human dreams, human discoveries. As your eyes adjust to the growing light, you begin to notice something that completely reframes everything you thought you understood about prehistoric consciousness. These caves weren't just artistic sanctuaries or spiritual centers. They were humanity's first universities, complete educational institutions where knowledge was stored, transmitted, and continuously updated through visual media that could survive geological timescales. But unlike modern universities that separate different fields of study, these prehistoric learning centers integrated all human knowledge into unified systems that treated art, science, spirituality, and practical survival skills as interconnected aspects of a single reality. Recent discoveries have revealed the true scope of these educational networks. Caves separated by thousands of miles show identical teaching methods, suggesting standardized curricula that were maintained across vast geographic regions for thousands of years. Student work has been identified alongside masterpieces, showing progression from basic exercises to advanced compositions that demonstrate complete mastery of sophisticated techniques. But here's what makes these discoveries truly extraordinary. The educational programs preserved in cave art weren't just teaching technical skills. They were developing human capabilities that modern education systems don't even recognize as learnable. Students were being trained to access expanded states of consciousness at will, to maintain rational thinking while experiencing profound alterations in perception, and to translate non-ordinary experiences into visual forms that could communicate those states to others. Archaeological evidence suggests that these programs produced individuals with cognitive abilities that seem almost superhuman by contemporary standards. Enhanced pattern recognition, expanded sensory awareness, improved intuitive problem solving, and the ability to access creative insights through systematic consciousness exploration. These weren't random talents. They were developed through structured training programs that anyone could master with appropriate instruction and practice. The training methods were remarkably sophisticated. Beginning students learned basic meditation techniques, breathing exercises that could induce mild alterations in consciousness, and simple artistic exercises that developed hand-eye coordination while simultaneously training attention and awareness. Intermediate students progressed to more advanced consciousness exploration techniques, complex artistic compositions, and the integration of multiple sensory modalities in their creative work. Advanced practitioners learned to maintain artistic control while experiencing profound alterations in consciousness, to translate complex inner experiences into visual narratives that could guide others through similar transformations, and to use art as a therapeutic tool for healing psychological trauma and facilitating personal growth. But the most advanced level of training involves something that modern education has completely abandoned. Students learn to access what can only be described as collective consciousness, shared awareness states where individual minds could connect directly with the accumulated knowledge and experience of their entire community and cultural lineage. Evidence for these collective consciousness experiences appears throughout cave art in the form of knowledge that no individual could have possessed alone. Astronomical observations that would require centuries of data collection appear in caves painted by artists who lived only decades. Animal behavioral information spans multiple species across different geographic regions, suggesting access to observational data gathered by numerous individuals over extended time periods. The artists weren't just painting their personal experiences, they were channeling collective knowledge, accessing shared memory banks that contain the accumulated wisdom of their entire cultural tradition. This explains the sudden appearance of sophisticated artistic techniques without apparent developmental periods, the immediate mastery that appears in the earliest cave art, and the consistency of knowledge across different regions and time periods. Modern neuroscience has begun to recognize the theoretical possibility of such collective consciousness experiences. Research into mirror neurons, quantum entanglement in biological systems, and the electromagnetic fields generated by groups of synchronized brains suggest that direct mind-to-mind communication might be more than just mystical speculation, but prehistoric communities weren't just theorizing about these possibilities. They were developing practical technologies for accessing collective consciousness states and applying the knowledge gained through these experiences to solve real-world problems. The caves served as interfaces between individual awareness and collective wisdom, places where personal consciousness could expand to access the full knowledge base of human culture. This collective consciousness technology explains many puzzles that have baffled archaeologists for decades. How did similar innovations appear simultaneously in widely separated regions? How did complex knowledge systems emerge without apparent developmental periods? How did prehistoric communities maintain sophisticated cultural practices across thousands of years without written language? The answer lies in consciousness technologies that modern civilization has forgotten. These communities had learned to access shared knowledge directly through expanded awareness states, bypassing the limitations of individual memory and experience. They weren't dependent on written records or formal educational institutions because they could access the accumulated wisdom of their entire species through consciousness exploration techniques. The decline of these capabilities coincides with the development of written language and formal educational institutions. As external knowledge storage systems became available, the internal technologies for accessing collective consciousness were gradually abandoned. Humanity gained the ability to preserve information outside of human memory, but lost the ability to access the vast knowledge reservoirs that exist within expanded consciousness. The caves preserve evidence of these lost capabilities, documented in visual forms that could survive the collapse of the cultures that created them. Every painting, every symbol, every carefully positioned pigment mark contains information about consciousness technologies that could revolutionize modern understanding of human potential. Recent research into these prehistoric consciousness technologies has produced remarkable results. Scientists who learn to access collective consciousness states report breakthrough insights that couldn't be achieved through individual thinking alone. Artists discover creative techniques that seem to emerge from sources beyond personal experience. Therapists find healing methods that appear to draw on wisdom accumulated over thousands of years of human experience. But accessing these capabilities requires more than just intellectual understanding. It demands the same kind of systematic training that prehistoric communities provided through their cave-based educational programs. Modern practitioners are discovering that collective consciousness isn't a mystical experience reserved for specially gifted individuals. It's a learnable skill that can be developed through appropriate instruction and practice. The training methods preserved in cave art are being adapted for contemporary applications. Meditation techniques that enhance pattern recognition, breathing exercises that expand sensory awareness, artistic practices that develop the ability to translate non-ordinary experiences into communicable forms, movement exercises that synchronize brainwaves among groups of practitioners. These techniques are finding applications in fields ranging from scientific research to artistic creation to therapeutic intervention. Research teams using collective consciousness methods report enhanced problem-solving abilities and breakthrough discoveries that emerge from group mind states. Artists accessing these techniques produce works that seem to channel knowledge and inspiration from sources beyond individual experience. But perhaps the most significant applications are emerging in the field of education. Schools experimenting with consciousness, expanding techniques, report enhanced learning outcomes, improved student engagement, and the development of cognitive abilities that traditional educational methods cannot access. Students learn not just information, but ways of thinking and perceiving that expand their entire approach to understanding. The caves suggest that these consciousness technologies were once considered normal aspects of human education. Every individual was expected to develop the ability to access expanded awareness states, to contribute to collective knowledge through consciousness exploration, and to apply insights gained through these practices to practical problems and creative challenges. Modern civilization has created external technologies that can store vast amounts of information and connect individuals across global communication networks. But we've lost the internal technologies that could access the even vaster knowledge reservoirs that exist within expanded human consciousness. The caves remind us of capabilities we've forgotten and challenge us to rediscover them. Standing at the threshold between the underground sanctuary and the surface world, you realize that your journey through these caves has been more than just a tour of prehistoric art. It's been an initiation into forgotten aspects of human consciousness, a reminder of capabilities that remain dormant in modern minds, but could be reactivated through appropriate training and community support. The ancient artists didn't just create beautiful images, they left instruction manuals for human consciousness, visual guides for accessing capabilities that could transform not just individual lives, but entire civilizations. Their legacy challenges us to remember what we're truly capable of becoming when we learn to use our minds as they were designed to be used. The techniques preserved in cave art aren't just historical curiosities, they're practical technologies for accessing human potential that remains largely unexplored by modern culture. The prehistoric masters who created these underground galleries weren't primitive ancestors struggling with crude tools. They were advanced consciousness researchers who had learned to access capabilities that we're only beginning to rediscover. As you emerge into daylight, carrying ancient wisdom back into the modern world, you understand that the caves haven't just shown you humanity's past. They've revealed its future potential, the dormant capabilities that could be awakened if we learn to integrate prehistoric consciousness technologies with contemporary knowledge and resources. The journey through these prehistoric sanctuaries changes everyone who undertakes it seriously. You can't witness evidence of such expanded human capabilities without questioning the limitations that modern culture accepts as normal. The caves challenge every assumption about human potential and offer practical methods for transcending those limitations. But accessing these capabilities requires more than just individual effort. The prehistoric communities that developed these consciousness technologies understood that such advanced practices require supportive communities, experienced guides, and cultural contexts that value expanded awareness as essential aspects of human development. The caves preserve not just artistic techniques, but social technologies for creating communities that could support the development of expanded human capabilities. They show us organizational methods, educational practices, and cultural values that enabled ordinary individuals to access extraordinary states of consciousness and apply the insights gained through these experiences to benefit their entire community. Modern society is beginning to recognize the need for such supportive communities. Research groups studying consciousness expansion, artistic communities exploring expanded awareness techniques, and educational institutions experimenting with consciousness-based learning methods are rediscovering the social technologies that prehistoric communities had developed to support advanced human development. The caves suggest that humanity's next evolutionary step won't be biological, but consciousness-based. The physical architecture of human brains hasn't changed significantly since these prehistoric artists created their masterpieces. But our understanding of how to use those brains continues to evolve. The caves preserve evidence of consciousness technologies that could accelerate that evolution dramatically. The ancient artists who decorated these underground sanctuaries possessed the same neural hardware as contemporary humans. But they had learned to use that hardware in ways that accessed capabilities we've largely forgotten. Their legacy isn't just artistic, it's a challenge to remember what human consciousness is truly capable of achieving when properly developed and applied. The flickering shadows that dance across these cave walls aren't just random patterns created by torchlight. They're reminders of the fluid boundary between ordinary and expanded consciousness, visual metaphors for the transformations that become possible when we learn to think like our prehistoric ancestors while applying their insights to contemporary challenges. Tomorrow, we'll explore how these ancient consciousness technologies influence the development of human civilization, what happened when these practices were gradually abandoned, and how modern research is beginning to rediscover practical applications for prehistoric wisdom that could revolutionize our understanding of human potential. We'll discover that these caves didn't just preserve humanity's artistic heritage, they safeguarded the instruction manual for human consciousness itself, complete operating procedures for capabilities that remain dormant in modern minds, but could be reactivated through appropriate training and community support. The torchlight flickers one final time as you turn toward the cave entrance, but the images burned into your memory will illuminate your understanding forever. You've witnessed the birth of human potential, documented in pigment and stone by minds that understood capabilities we're only beginning to rediscover. In the growing light of the cave entrance, you carry with you more than just knowledge of prehistoric art. You carry the seeds of transformation, ancient understanding that human consciousness is far more vast and capable than modern civilization has learned to acknowledge. The caves have shown you not just where we came from, but who we could become again. The silence that surrounds you as you emerge isn't empty. It's pregnant with possibility, thick with the weight of discoveries that could reshape everything we think we know about human nature. These underground galleries weren't just repositories of ancient art. They were laboratories for consciousness exploration, educational institutions for developing human potential, and libraries for preserving knowledge that could guide humanity toward its next evolutionary breakthrough. The hands that painted these caves possess the same creative potential as any modern artist. The minds behind these images contain the same capacity for expanded awareness as any contemporary consciousness explorer. The only difference is training, community support, and cultural values that recognized consciousness development as essential for human flourishing. Standing here at the boundary between the ancient underground world and the modern surface reality, you understand that the caves offer more than just historical insight. They provide a roadmap for human transformation, practical methods for accessing capabilities that could revolutionize individual lives and transform entire civilizations. The prehistoric artists didn't just create beautiful images to decorate cave walls. They developed consciousness technologies that could unlock human potential on scales that modern culture has barely begun to imagine. Their legacy challenges us to remember what we're truly capable of becoming when we learn to use our minds as these ancient masters had learned to use theirs. The journey continues, but now you carry ancient wisdom into the modern world, seeds of transformation that could bloom into capabilities that would astonish even the prehistoric masters who first developed these consciousness technologies in the dancing shadows of caves, lit by flickering flames. The emergence from these sacred chambers marks not an ending, but a beginning. As your eyes adjust to daylight after hours in the flickering glow of ancient flames, you realize that everything you thought you knew about human consciousness has been fundamentally challenged by what you've witnessed in the depths. These caves weren't just art galleries or spiritual centers. They were humanity's first research institutions, places where our ancestors conducted systematic investigations into the nature of consciousness itself. The evidence is overwhelming once you know how to look for it. Chemical residues that suggest controlled experiments with mind-altering substances. Tool marks that indicate precise modifications to cave acoustics for optimal sound resonance. Pigment arrangements that create specific visual effects under different lighting conditions. But here's what makes this discovery truly revolutionary. The research being conducted in these prehistoric laboratories wasn't random experimentation. It was systematic, methodical, and incredibly sophisticated. These ancient consciousness researchers had developed protocols for safely exploring altered states, methods for documenting their findings, and techniques for training others to replicate their results. Archaeological evidence reveals structured research programs that spanned multiple generations. Junior researchers worked under the guidance of experienced practitioners, learning basic techniques before advancing to more complex experiments. Senior researchers maintained detailed visual records of their findings, creating reference libraries that could guide future investigations. The sophistication of these programs rivals modern scientific research methods. Controlled conditions, reproducible results, peer review processes where multiple researchers verified each other's findings. These weren't primitive shamans randomly consuming plant medicines. They were sophisticated scientists exploring the furthest reaches of human consciousness with the same methodical approach that modern researchers apply to quantum physics or molecular biology. And their discoveries were extraordinary. Evidence suggests they had identified specific consciousness states that enhanced different cognitive abilities. Some states improved pattern recognition and analytical thinking. Others enhanced creativity and artistic expression. Still others provided access to what can only be described as expanded sensory awareness that allowed perception of environmental information beyond normal human capabilities. But the most remarkable discovery was their development of what we might call consciousness networking technologies. Methods for linking individual awareness into collective mind states, where multiple people could share thoughts, memories, and insights directly. The cave art provides visual documentation of these collective consciousness experiments, showing knowledge that no individual could have possessed alone. Modern neuroscience is beginning to understand how such phenomena might be possible. Research into mirror neurons suggests that human brains are naturally designed for empathic connection. Studies of synchronized brainwaves show that groups engaged in coordinated activities develop shared neural patterns. Investigation of quantum effects in biological systems reveals mechanisms that could theoretically support direct mind-to-mind communication. But prehistoric communities weren't just theorizing about these possibilities. They had developed practical technologies for accessing collective consciousness states and documented their findings in visual formats that could preserve the knowledge across thousands of years. Every cave painting contains information about consciousness technologies that could revolutionize modern understanding of human potential. The decline of these research programs coincides with major environmental changes that disrupted prehistoric societies. As ice ages ended and sea levels rose, many communities were forced to abandon their cave laboratories and focus on immediate survival needs. The sophisticated consciousness technologies that had taken thousands of years to develop were gradually lost as communities struggled to adapt to rapidly changing conditions. But the knowledge wasn't completely lost. Fragments survived in various forms throughout human history. Mystery schools in ancient Egypt preserved elements of consciousness expansion techniques. Greek philosophers described states of awareness that mirror prehistoric discoveries. Indigenous, shamanic traditions around the world maintained practices that clearly derive from cave art consciousness technologies. The problem is that these fragments were never fully integrated back into comprehensive systems. Modern civilization developed external technologies for storing and processing information, but lost the internal technologies for accessing the vast knowledge reservoirs that exist within expanded consciousness. We gained the ability to build computers and global communication networks, but forgot how to directly access the even more powerful processing capabilities of networked human awareness. Recent research into prehistoric consciousness technologies has produced remarkable results. Scientists who learn basic cave art techniques report enhanced problem-solving abilities and breakthrough insights that couldn't be achieved through conventional thinking methods. Artists accessing these practices produce works that seem to channel knowledge from sources beyond individual experience. Therapists applying prehistoric consciousness methods achieve healing outcomes that surpass traditional approaches. But accessing these capabilities requires systematic training that modern educational institutions don't provide. The techniques preserved in cave art demand years of dedicated practice, experienced guidance, and supportive communities that understand the challenges and opportunities of consciousness exploration. Most importantly, they require cultural contexts that value expanded awareness as essential for human development rather than dismissing it as irrelevant mysticism. The caves challenge us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human nature and potential. The minds that created these prehistoric masterpieces possessed the same neural architecture as contemporary humans, but they had learned to use that architecture in ways that accessed capabilities we've largely abandoned. Their achievements suggest that modern limitations on human consciousness aren't biological constraints, but cultural choices that could be changed through appropriate education and training. Evidence from cave art sites worldwide indicates that consciousness expansion technologies were once considered normal aspects of human development. Every individual was expected to learn basic awareness enhancement techniques, contribute to collective knowledge through consciousness exploration, and apply insights gained through these practices to benefit their entire community. Modern society has created external systems that can store vast amounts of information and connect people across global networks. But we've neglected the internal systems that could provide access to even greater knowledge and more profound connections. The caves remind us of capabilities we've forgotten and challenge us to develop modern applications for prehistoric wisdom. Contemporary research groups are beginning to rediscover practical applications for cave art consciousness technologies, meditation techniques that enhance cognitive flexibility, breathing exercises that expand sensory awareness, artistic practices that develop intuitive problem-solving abilities, movement methods that create synchronized brain states among groups of practitioners. These techniques are finding applications in fields ranging from scientific research to educational innovation to therapeutic intervention. Teams using collective consciousness methods report enhanced collaboration and breakthrough discoveries that emerge from shared awareness states. Students learning consciousness expansion techniques show improved academic performance and development of cognitive abilities that traditional education cannot access. But perhaps the most significant potential applications involve addressing global challenges that require new forms of thinking and cooperation. Climate change, social inequality, technological disruption. All of these issues demand innovative solutions that transcend conventional approaches. The consciousness technologies preserved in cave art could provide access to the expanded awareness and collective intelligence necessary for developing truly effective responses. The prehistoric researchers who developed these technologies understood something that modern civilization has forgotten. Individual consciousness, no matter how brilliant, is limited by personal experience and cultural conditioning. But collective consciousness can access knowledge and insights that transcend individual limitations, providing solutions that no single mind could discover alone. Cave art preserves visual instructions for accessing these collective intelligence states. The symbols, patterns, and artistic techniques aren't just decorative elements, they're functional technologies for expanding awareness beyond individual boundaries and connecting with the accumulated wisdom of human culture and experience. Modern applications of these technologies could revolutionize approaches to education, research, and social organization. Students could learn not just information, but ways of thinking that expand their entire cognitive capacity. Researchers could access insights that emerge from collective intelligence rather than individual analysis. Communities could make decisions based on shared wisdom that transcends personal interests and limited perspectives. But developing these applications requires more than just technical knowledge. The prehistoric communities that created cave art consciousness technologies understood that such advanced practices require supportive social structures, ethical frameworks, and cultural values that prioritize collective well-being over individual advantage. The caves preserve evidence of these social technologies as well. Organizational methods that enabled large groups to cooperate in consciousness exploration. educational systems that prepared individuals for collective awareness experiences, cultural practices that integrated expanded consciousness insights into daily life and community decision-making. These social innovations may be even more important than the consciousness technologies themselves. Individual awareness expansion without appropriate social support can lead to isolation and disconnection. But when embedded in communities that understand and value these capabilities, consciousness expansion becomes a tool for enhanced cooperation, creativity, and collective problem-solving. Modern society is beginning to recognize the need for such supportive frameworks. Research institutions studying consciousness are developing ethical guidelines for awareness expansion experiments. Educational programs are creating curricula that integrate consciousness development with academic learning. Communities are forming around shared interests in exploring human potential through prehistoric wisdom. The cave suggests that humanity's next evolutionary leap won't be biological, but consciousness-based. The physical structure of human brains hasn't changed significantly since these prehistoric artists created their masterpieces. But our understanding of how to use those brains continues to evolve, and the caves preserve advanced operating instructions that could accelerate that evolution dramatically. The ancient artists who decorated these underground laboratories possessed remarkable insights into consciousness that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. Their visual documentation of awareness expansion techniques, collective intelligence methods, and consciousness networking technologies provides a foundation for developing human capabilities that could transform individual lives and reshape entire civilizations. Standing here in the growing daylight, carrying ancient wisdom back into the contemporary world, you understand that the caves offer more than just historical fascination. They provide practical blueprints for human transformation, detailed instructions for accessing capabilities that remain dormant in modern minds, but could be activated through appropriate training and community support. The prehistoric consciousness researchers didn't just create beautiful art to decorate cave walls. They developed comprehensive technologies for exploring and expanding human awareness, documenting their discoveries in visual formats that could preserve the knowledge across geological timescales. Their legacy challenges us to remember what we're capable of becoming when we learn to use our minds as these ancient masters learned to use theirs. The journey through these caves changes everyone who undertakes it seriously. You can't witness evidence of such expanded human capabilities without questioning the limitations that modern culture accepts as normal. The visual proof of prehistoric consciousness achievements demands reconsideration of assumptions about human nature and potential. But accessing these capabilities requires more than just intellectual understanding. The techniques preserved in cave art demand systematic practice, experience guidance, and communities that support consciousness exploration as essential for human development. Most importantly, they require recognition that individual awareness expansion serves collective well-being rather than personal advantage. The caves preserve not just consciousness technologies, but wisdom about how to use them responsibly. The prehistoric researchers understood that expanded awareness brings expanded responsibility, that collective consciousness access requires commitment to collective benefit, and that consciousness exploration serves the evolution of human culture rather than individual aggrandizement. Modern applications of cave art consciousness technologies must be grounded in similar ethical frameworks. The capabilities documented in these underground laboratories are too powerful to be used carelessly or selfishly. They demand the same kind of systematic preparation, community support, and ethical commitment that prehistoric communities provided for their consciousness researchers. The ancient artists who created these masterpieces weren't just talented individuals expressing personal visions. They were members of research communities dedicated to expanding human consciousness for the benefit of all. Their individual contributions served larger collective projects that spanned generations and influenced the development of entire civilizations. Contemporary consciousness researchers are beginning to understand this collective dimension of awareness expansion. The most significant breakthroughs emerge not from individual efforts, but from collaborative explorations where multiple minds contribute to shared investigations. The caves document sophisticated methods for organizing such collaborative research that could guide modern applications. As you carry this ancient wisdom into the contemporary world, you realize that the caves haven't just preserved humanity's artistic heritage. They've safeguarded operating instructions for human consciousness that could guide our species toward its next evolutionary breakthrough. The prehistoric consciousness researchers left us more than beautiful paintings. They left us maps for navigating the vast territories of unexplored human potential. The flickering shadows that danced across cave walls weren't just artistic effects. They were visual metaphors for the fluid boundaries of consciousness, reminders that awareness is far more flexible and capable than modern culture acknowledges. The ancient artists understood something profound about the nature of mind that we're only beginning to rediscover through contemporary research. Their legacy calls us forward, challenging us to develop modern applications for prehistoric wisdom while maintaining the ethical frameworks and community support systems that made such advanced consciousness exploration possible. The caves offer us a glimpse of what human civilization could become when consciousness technologies are integrated with contemporary knowledge and resources. The journey continues, but now with ancient guidance. The prehistoric consciousness researchers who decorated these underground sanctuaries have left us detailed instructions for accessing capabilities that could revolutionize human experience. Their visual documentation of awareness expansion techniques provides practical methods for transcending the limitations that modern culture accepts as inevitable. But most importantly, they've shown us that consciousness exploration isn't just individual development, but collective evolution. The capabilities documented in cave art serve the advancement of human culture and the well-being of all life. Their legacy reminds us that expanded awareness brings expanded responsibility, and that the ultimate purpose of consciousness development is service to the larger whole, of which we're all part. Standing here at the threshold between ancient wisdom and contemporary possibility, you understand that the caves have offered more than just a tour through prehistoric art. They've provided initiation into forgotten aspects of human consciousness and practical guidance for accessing capabilities that could transform not just individual lives, but the entire trajectory of human civilization. The ancient artists didn't just paint pictures on cave walls. They created instruction manuals for human consciousness, visual guides for accessing the vast potential that remains largely dormant in modern minds. Their legacy challenges us to remember what we're truly capable of becoming when we learn to integrate prehistoric consciousness technologies with contemporary knowledge and resources. The silence that greets you as you finally step from the cave entrance feels alive somehow, pregnant with possibilities you never imagined existed. Your eyes, so accustomed to the dancing shadows of torchlight, struggle to adjust to the harsh reality of modern daylight. But something fundamental has shifted in your understanding of what it means to be human. These weren't just caves decorated by bored hunter-gatherers killing time between hunts. What you've witnessed represents humanity's first systematic exploration of consciousness itself, documented in pigments and stone by researchers whose sophistication rivals anything modern science has achieved. They understood something we've forgotten in our rush toward digital connection and external technology. They knew how to access the vast processing power that exists within human awareness itself. Think about what this means for everything we believe about human development. For decades, anthropologists have painted our ancestors as crude survivors, barely scraping by in harsh environments with primitive tools and simple social structures. But the evidence scattered across these cave walls tells a completely different story. These communities had developed educational systems that could train individuals to access expanded states of consciousness, maintain rational thinking during profound alterations in perception, and translate those experiences into visual languages that could communicate complex insights across thousands of years. Modern neuroscience is just beginning to understand the mechanisms that make such capabilities possible. Recent research into neuroplasticity shows that human brains remain capable of dramatic reorganization throughout adult life. Studies of meditation practitioners reveal that sustained consciousness training can literally rewire neural networks, creating new patterns of connectivity that enhance cognitive abilities far beyond normal ranges. But our prehistoric ancestors weren't just discovering these possibilities. They had developed comprehensive training programs that could reliably produce such enhanced capabilities in ordinary individuals. The evidence is scattered throughout cave art sites worldwide. Practice exercises that develop specific cognitive skills. Progressive training sequences that build from basic awareness techniques to advanced consciousness exploration methods. Assessment criteria that determined when students were ready to advance to more challenging practices. These weren't random spiritual practices or artistic hobbies. They were systematic technologies for expanding human consciousness that required the same kind of methodical development and institutional support that modern universities provide for academic disciplines. Except instead of training people to memorize information or manipulate external tools, these prehistoric institutions were developing internal capabilities that could access knowledge and insights unavailable through ordinary thinking processes. The implications stagger the imagination. If consciousness expansion technologies were once considered normal aspects of human education, what happened to those capabilities? When did we decide that the extraordinary awareness abilities documented in cave art were impossible or irrelevant? How much human potential has been abandoned in favor of external technologies that, while impressive, pale in comparison to the processing power that exists within properly trained human consciousness? Archaeological evidence suggests that the decline of cave art consciousness technologies coincided with major environmental disruptions that forced prehistoric communities to focus on immediate survival needs rather than long-term consciousness development. As ice ages ended and familiar territories became uninhabitable, the sophisticated educational institutions preserved in these underground sanctuaries were gradually abandoned. Knowledge that had taken thousands of years to accumulate was lost within a few generations as communities struggled to adapt to rapidly changing conditions. But fragments survived in various forms throughout human history. Mystery schools in ancient civilizations maintained elements of consciousness expansion techniques. Indigenous traditions around the world preserve practices that clearly derive from cave art methodologies. Even modern therapeutic approaches sometimes stumble upon principles that prehistoric consciousness researchers had systematically developed tens of thousands of years earlier. The problem is that these surviving fragments were never reassembled into comprehensive systems. Modern civilization developed impressive external technologies for information storage and global communication, but we lost the internal technologies for accessing the even more powerful capabilities that exist within networked human consciousness. We learned to build computers that can process vast amounts of data, but forgot how to access the collective intelligence that emerges when properly trained minds work together. Recent experiments with cave art consciousness techniques have produced remarkable results that suggest these ancient capabilities remain intact in modern humans, simply dormant from lack of appropriate training. Research teams learning basic awareness expansion methods report enhanced problem-solving abilities and breakthrough insights that couldn't be achieved through conventional analysis. Artists accessing these techniques produce works that seem to channel knowledge from sources beyond individual experience. Therapists applying prehistoric consciousness principles achieve healing outcomes that surpass traditional therapeutic approaches. But accessing these capabilities requires more than just intellectual understanding or casual experimentation. The techniques preserved in cave art demand systematic training that most modern educational institutions don't provide. They require experienced guidance from practitioners who understand both the opportunities and the dangers of consciousness exploration. Most importantly, they need supportive communities that value expanded awareness as essential for human development rather than dismissing it as irrelevant mysticism or dangerous delusion. The caves challenge every assumption modern culture holds about human limitations and possibilities. The minds that created these prehistoric masterpieces possessed the same neural architecture as contemporary humans, but they had learned to use that architecture in ways that accessed capabilities we've largely abandoned. Their achievements suggest that what we consider normal human consciousness represents only a tiny fraction of what's actually possible when awareness is properly developed and applied. Evidence from cave art sites worldwide indicates that consciousness expansion was once considered as fundamental to human development as learning language or developing social skills. Every individual was expected to master basic awareness enhancement techniques, contribute to collective knowledge through consciousness exploration, and apply insights gained through these practices to benefit their entire community. It wasn't optional training for specialists or spiritual seekers. It was considered essential education for fully functional human beings. Modern society has created external systems that can store enormous amounts of information and connect people across global networks. But we've neglected the internal systems that could provide access to even greater knowledge and more profound connections. The caves remind us of capabilities we've forgotten and challenge us to develop contemporary applications for prehistoric wisdom that could revolutionize approaches to education, research, and social organization. Contemporary scientists are beginning to rediscover practical applications for cave art consciousness technologies. Meditation techniques that enhance cognitive flexibility and creative problem solving. Breathing exercises that expand sensory awareness and improve pattern recognition. Artistic practices that develop intuitive insights and emotional intelligence. Movement methods that synchronize brain states among groups of practitioners, enabling enhanced collaboration and shared decision-making. These techniques are finding applications in fields ranging from scientific research to educational innovation to therapeutic intervention. Teams using collective consciousness methods report enhanced collaboration and breakthrough discoveries that emerge from shared awareness states rather than individual analysis. Students learning consciousness expansion techniques show improved academic performance and development of cognitive abilities that traditional education cannot access. Patients receiving therapy that incorporates prehistoric consciousness principles experience healing that addresses not just symptoms, but underlying patterns that create psychological and physical dysfunction. But perhaps the most significant potential applications involve addressing global challenges that require new forms of thinking and cooperation. Climate change, social inequality, technological disruption, political polarization. All of these issues demand innovative solutions that transcend conventional approaches, limited by individual perspectives and cultural conditioning. The consciousness technologies preserved in cave art could provide access to the expanded awareness and collective intelligence necessary for developing truly effective responses to challenges that affect all of humanity. The prehistoric researchers who developed these technologies understood something that modern civilization has forgotten. Individual consciousness, no matter how brilliant or well-educated, remains limited by personal experience and cultural assumptions. But collective consciousness can access knowledge and insights that transcend individual limitations, providing solutions that no single mind could discover alone. Cave art preserves visual instructions for accessing these collective intelligence states, techniques that could revolutionize how humans approach complex problems and make decisions that affect entire communities. As you stand in the growing daylight, carrying these ancient revelations back into the modern world, you realize that what you've witnessed changes everything. These caves weren't just humanity's first art galleries. They were our species' original research laboratories, educational institutions, and consciousness exploration centers, all rolled into one. The hands that painted these walls possessed the same creative potential as yours, the same capacity for wonder, the same drive to understand and express the deepest mysteries of human experience. The only difference was training, community support, and a culture that recognized consciousness development as essential for human flourishing. These prehistoric masters left us more than beautiful paintings. They left us an instruction manual for human potential that we're only beginning to rediscover. Manual for human potential that we're only beginning to rediscover.